In nearly all cases with modern health systems, you're waiting months for appointments only to spend a mere 10 minutes with a doctor who quickly hands out a generic diagnosis that is likely rooted in a total misunderstanding of health and causes, and then you're offered a one-size-fits-all medication or invasive treatments with unpleasant side effects. If this sounds all too familiar, consider a different approach with the New Biology Clinic, founded by Dr. Tom Cowan, a respected natural health doctor, author, and speaker. Dr. Cowan's holistic perspective on health and wellness and a deep understanding of the true nature of health and disease sets this clinic apart. With the New Biology Clinic, it's not about quick fixes and suppressing symptoms. The practitioners take time to understand your unique story, recognizing that health is unique to the individual and that illnesses have a variety of causes, physically and metaphysically. Members of the New Biology Clinic enjoy a flat monthly fee that includes a range of valuable services like health consults as needed, practitioner-led live streams on diverse health topics, access to a members-only resource library, and multiple live group sessions every month. These sessions cover fitness, breathing integration, biofield tuning, guided meditation, EFT tapping, and much more. Unlike traditional healthcare systems that thrive on frequent visits, prescriptions, treatments, and suppressing symptoms, the New Biology Clinic's motivation is to make you healthy and keep you that way. Visit newbiologyclinic.com to learn more and use code THEWAYFORWARD for $50 off your account activation. If you're a member of The Way Forward, email hello@thewayforward.com to receive $150 off your account activation. Your journey to genuine healing begins here. Veda Austin is a water researcher, public speaker, mother, artist, and author. She has dedicated the last 10 years observing and photographing the life of water. She believes that water is fluid intelligence, observing itself through every living organism on the planet and in the universe. I am so grateful to have you in my house right now.
And I'm so happy to be in your house right now.
You were just playing with my daughter in the playroom while I was scrambling to clean up because we just got back from Confluence, and it takes a village. So thank you for being a part of my village for this weekend.
You're welcome. She taught me how to put a bunch of little plastic flower garden together. It's great.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. Okay, so I interviewed you for Health Freedom for Humanity podcast a long time ago, but I've not interviewed you for The Way Forward. And because I probably have some new audience, I'm shocked if anyone isn't familiar with your work at this time, but you said you're getting new people every day, which is great. That's a good thing, actually. But let's just give a brief overview of what it is that you do.
Sure. So I am a water researcher and a crystallographer, and that's just a fancy way of saying that I take photographs of ice at a specific stage of freezing, which can show that whatever the influence or inspiration was prior to freezing, I might see an imprint of that in the ice. So for example, if I put my hand in the water and then froze that water, froze it to that stage I'm talking about, I might see a hand in the ice as an image.
And how did you discover this method of freezing and seeing these designs in water?
I was curious. A lot of this came from curiosity because I had a healing experience with water, and it made me ask the question, what is water? And most people say, well, it's H2O, you know. And so, well, what does that mean? And so when you look at an analysis of water, it will tell you what water holds, but it doesn't tell you what it is. It's kind of like me saying, well, I'll take some blood, of your blood, and we'll look and see all the things in the blood. And then now I know every single thing there is to know about you. So what is this part of water that doesn't hold things? And that made me curious. So I ended up doing research, and I found Dr. Gerald Pollack's work, But I also came across Masaru Emoto, and we know that he wasn't embraced by the scientific community.
Mm-hmm.
And there were various reasons for that. But what he did with approximately 8 contrasting photos was really open people up to seeing themselves as bodies of water, sensitive to thoughts, sounds, environment, music, and all of the things that we're exposed to as human beings. And for that, I think there are so many people that are so grateful. Then I found somebody called Laurent Costa, who is a French microscopic photographer who flash freezes water in much the same way as Emoto. But he always believed that water was his spiritual teacher. Mm. So he didn't want to experiment on water. What he wanted to do was invite water to share whatever it wanted. But sometimes he couldn't help it, and he would smile at the water prior to freezing and photographing. And he was seeing smiley faces in the water, multiple of them, not just one. And he would see hearts, he would see fish, he would see things relative to his thoughts of that day or something that had happened to him during that week.
Wow.
And that really blew me away because art is very different than geometry. So when we think of water, certainly frozen water, we tend to think about snowflakes or snowflake-like geometries.
And this is pretty established scientifically, right?
Yeah. Lots of people have photographed snowflakes, so that's no surprise.
Right. But even in like a lab context of water, like the hexagonal structure of water, right? And when it's pure H2O, so to speak, that's well established scientifically, so that's no surprise. But it's that you're saying that this artistic expression, that is a huge shock at that point in time.
Yeah, it is. Well, when you think about the importance of art in society and how art is an expression, a very human expression. If you go to cave people, they would, draw and kind of paint with their hands art relative to what they were experiencing, stories that they wanted to tell. There was an intelligence there where they were able to count how many animals were there and what was where. And so it was a way in which they used for communication, but it was also very human. Mm. So art is really the heart of water. Mm. And to be able to see art, and I mean art, not the kind more realistic art. So when you see these images that he had, it's like, it's hard to miss.
Right.
We see a smiley face, we see these hearts, they're incredible. And then that led me on to the work or an observation of a man called Thomas Hieronymus, who was a radionic engineer. And he observed that the freshly placed organs of an animal when he was in a Parisian meat market on a very cold day seemed to be affecting the way the frost froze on the glass behind where they were placed. So, for example, the frost would freeze into the shape of a liver organ above a liver organ and so on and so forth. And his hypothesis was there's some kind of life force energy still emanating out of these organs, even though they weren't attached to an animal. Mm. And he put that down to there being water in the blood. And each organ has something called a sonic signature, which is like a cymatic imprint for form and function. And water in all its stages is always communicating with itself. So from his opinion, the water in the blood, which was still very fresh, was communicating that form imprint with the water in the air. And when the water in the air hit the glass, it took on the form. Mm. And what was wonderful for me in this early stage of curiosity was that he was seeing this with his naked eye.
Yeah.
And all that time ago, 10 years ago, I didn't have a microscope, which ended up being a good thing because it made me think outside of the box if there's a box.
You wouldn't be doing what you're doing now if it wasn't for that. Yeah.
I'm very grateful. And out of all of those things, I noticed that the secret was in the freezing where the unseen becomes seen. And so that's where I thought, well, I'm just going to get a petri dish of water. I used the spring water that helped heal me, but I've used all kinds of water over the many, many years. Mm. And I thought, well, I'm going to project a thought into the water. And I was thinking, what am I going to think about? Which is kind of weird on itself. And then I noticed a bit of fluff floating around in the petri dish. So I was like, oh my God. So I put my hand in, and I took out the fluff. And I consciously thought, oh, I wonder if my hand will have any impact on the water's quote unquote memory, because I genuinely didn't know if that was real or if even memory is the right word. And so then I thought, okay, well, I'm going to stick in the freezer with the peas and the broccoli and everything else. And I forgot about it. Like, I had no context of different stages of freezing or any of that stuff then. And a few hours later, I pulled it out, held it up to the light, took my very first photo of nearly 55,000 photos of water responding in the most incredibly intelligent way. And the image was of a hand. It looked like an X-ray of a hand.
This is the one your kid said was creepy?
Yeah, I showed my son. I said, what does this look like to you? And he says, look like a creepy hand, Mum. But I would like to put into context that when I eventually became really good friends with Dr. Gerald Pollack, he suggested to me, do a survey of your photos for image recognition. And I put, and we'll get into all the rest of my body of work soon, but I'm telling you this because of what happened with this hand in the survey. So I had 25 photographs simply asking, what does this image look like to you? I had friends circulate it through social media, so people didn't know it was coming from me and people didn't know what they were looking at. And 298 people did the survey, and 85% of people were able to recognize the images for what the influence was. And there were 3 images where 100% of people were able to recognize the image for the influence, and the hand was one of them. And I say that to address pareidolia, where you kind of see something and you make it out to be something because you want to see it.
Right.
When you have a vast number of people who say, yes, they can see that that picture is a dog or a hand or a tree, then that kind of is not come into the category of pareidolia.
Yeah, that's incredible. So it's almost objective, you could say, that this is clearly depicting these images, right?
Yeah.
And again, this is different than structure of water and this hexagonal structure. This is an artistic expression, right?
Yeah.
So you've now, as you said, documented over 50,000 examples of water indicating some artistic expression. And within those 50,000, you've documented what you call hydroglyphs. So it's not just an artistic expression, because I think from that lens, one could say, okay, our consciousness impacts water. But then there's a leap from saying that to, no, water itself is fundamentally conscious and able to communicate with us. And that's kind of what these hydroglyphs, as you call them, indicate, right?
Yeah. Well, there's 3 things you see when you learn my technique. And so I think it's nice just to quickly say how to do it so that people can have some context. And that's a big question you've asked, and we're going to launch into that. And I'll say this as quick as I can. So I have not frozen water solid in over 9 years. And I look back at my work when I did that, and I'm amazed that I got the imagery that I did. So
I have ideas of why. And I think it's because water was like, okay, we need to make sure that this lady
gets it somehow.
Yeah.
But luckily I'm curious.
Right.
So I was wondering, because I learned that this 4th stage or phase of water happens also within the freezing state before water is a solid, and in between a liquid and solid, and actually also in the melting stage. So I started to open my freezer earlier and earlier to see what was going on in there. And then at around 5 minutes and 20 seconds, there was liquid on top and ice underneath. I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I pulled it out, the liquid water tipped away, and the crystallography stuck to the dish was like a quantum leap from the imagery I'd been seeing before. Incredibly thin layer of ice, very clear. It allows the colors of the background to come through, and you have like this 3-dimensional imprint, which is just phenomenal. And I want to address what people might see, because I see the world through an artistic lens. I'm a researcher, but I worked professionally as an oil painter for years, so that's my nature, and I think water always knows our nature. And so I see a signature pattern, which can include geometries. So a signature pattern identifies the different types of water. And I've done this by repeating it multiple times. So with spring water, they're collected within an hour and frozen within an hour of collection, will show hexagonal patterns. And then rainwater always shows a kind of fanning pattern with a curve. The water that's gone through any filter tends to come into these compacted lines. Seawater has like these little circles that look like subwoofers with this little star, and there's lots of them. Tap water can be very disordered depending on, how many like right angles it's gone through.
Right.
And so that's what I would call a signature pattern. And the signature pattern of spring water will degrade the longer it's been in a bottle. And it will degrade from a hexagon to a flower shape to a kind of fern shape to then like grasses to lines and dots.
So that's the chain of degradation?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Have you thought about why that is, those specific symbols?
Actually, you can see there's two types of things that happen. So to explain the hexagon, it looks like, I call it a star fern hexagon because that's what it looks like. In the middle, it's like a 6-sided star, like with lines crossing. Off each leg or line, there's what looks like a fern. And then if you put it all together, it forms a hexagonal shape.
Wow.
So what happens is that in one form of degradation, the fern itself kind of comes off. So you have one fern shape, one leg with a fern shape. Then all the little fern bits come off. So you get like this kind of curved line. And eventually that becomes just one small line. And then the other way it happens is that in the middle, the star starts to open up. And so it's not so tightly formed. And this sort of hexagon shape, empty hexagon, starts to open up. And then it sort of looks a little bit like a flower. And then that kind of eventually forms into this tiny little hexagon that becomes a dot. So you're left with lines and dots. And that's mostly what tap water is made of, lines and dots. So it's almost like Legos.
Yeah.
Lots of Legos, you know what that's like, Legos everywhere. But then when you put it together, it creates form. And that seems to be the building blocks that water can design and create. But one of the most important parts of those building blocks is also light, which we can get into more.
Yeah.
So I kind of we can segue back to your question, about consciousness and is water conscious? And that's a really big question because I hear people talk about it all the time. And I think there's a lot of things we don't know. And I can honestly say there's lots of things I don't know. And I'm always happy to say it if I don't know.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that I think that there is a divinity that flows through water at all times. And I think as human beings, we have this tendency to brush a lot of things with the human yardstick. And we like to put things into boxes and tear things apart, and because that somehow makes us feel safer somehow. But what I see, and one example would be people comparing spring water and tap water. Yes, there is a structural difference. But what I would say is that tap water has taught me some of the most deepest lessons in this work, and I use it a lot. And I hear people say, it's dead water, it's destructured. Well, none of this is what I'm talking about drinking. I'm not talking about drinking it. So what is it that we're actually seeing in this crystallography? So one of the things with tap water is you do the crystallography and you see, yes, it's disordered. And then you let that same water melt. And then you do something different with it where you hold it to your heartbeat, for example, for 1 minute. And then you refreeze it, the exact same water. And then you see that it has started to form ferns. It's started to form little hexagons, little flowers. It started to improve structurally and sometimes dramatically, but it hasn't changed chemically that we know of. And so that means that it is more akin to an emotion. So I think water has an energetic state of health just like we do.
Wow.
And so from that is an interesting kind of interweave into what is that we're looking at. Is this a kind of consciousness? And just to add the more scientific part to that, I've done the exact same thing where I've used the same exact tap water, done those two tests side by side, and let that melt, and not done anything to it, and frozen it again, and it's gone back to disorder.
Wow.
So you can see that there has been a actual structural change through conscious expression. And I would add that I have been sent every single restructuring device known to man, and I have a 1-year waiting list of crystallography of so many things I need to get to do for people.
Yeah.
But the biggest changes I have seen structurally have simply come from conscious expression.
Wow.
And I think that consciousness knows consciousness. And someone once said to me, what if water is expressing its consciousness through us and every living thing on this planet to observe itself from every different perceivable and imperceivable perspective? And I also like what Bruce Lee says, water becomes the cup, it becomes the teapot. It's like water became the human. And there's many more things we can go into. I like what Moses Hackman says. He says that water is the glove on the hand of consciousness. The only thing I could say is that water and consciousness are so intimately intertwined that they behave as one. And there is no life or conscious awareness without water. And that can lead on to a friend of mine thinks that hydrogen is the spirit of water. And so one of the things in which, and I don't know if that's true. It could come back to a condensed light that is the spirit of water. But then I think, there's so much to get to know, to start to understand, or to look inside, because we are, by molecular count, not by volume, 99% water. Our eye lens is 99% water. Everything we see through the world is seen through the lens of water. When we look into each other's eyes, we are literally looking at water. And when we think, I always say, if eyes are the windows to the soul, then tears are an expression of spirit. And I mentioned at Confluence the other day when I'm losing track of days. So now
feels like 2 weeks ago, and it also feels like yesterday.
Yesterday,
and
yeah.
right now at the same time.
But I heard that in our grief and even in our joy, that tears always show up in these very heightened emotional states. And the tears come out of our eyes, and our faces are designed so perfectly that they roll back around towards our mouths because they've been reordered and restructured to either help heal our hearts or to enhance our joy. And we are bodies of water, so we are conscious water bodies. And again, if we just brush everything with a human yardstick and say, well, the cow isn't conscious or the tree isn't conscious, well, everything has intelligence relative to its form and function. And what we think is intelligence is like recognizing ourselves in the mirror and having a big brain. I suspect the trees might take some kind of have some thoughts about that, right. Perhaps.
I mean, you look at the secret life of plants, and Hannah Maria, who spoke this last weekend, and other people, indigenous cultures, and how innately intelligent and brilliant and communicative plants are. Right.
I want to tell you a really quick story. There's a man in New Zealand who has this technology which is able to record sounds from things like trees and plants and stones, and even the sound of water, not the sound of it moving, but a different kind of sound. And there is this story, this legend from the tribe up north of New Zealand, the Maori tribe, that the sperm whale and the native sacred kauri tree have a relationship there, that the tree is an ancestor of the whale. And so he went and he recorded the sound of the kauri tree, and he went out onto a boat and put that sound down into the sea. And from far, 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 far away, they were able to pick up a sound of the whale calling back.
Wow.
And one of the things that was explained is that the whale sound is so powerful through the ocean, but what we often forget and maybe not think about is that it doesn't just go through the ocean, especially when it's along the coast. It goes over the beach and into the forest, because that's how so much of New Zealand was and often is, and actually is where we have the beach and then we have the forest. So the sounds would actually reach the trees and the trees would call back.
That is incredible. Oh my goodness.
So I would say the term of consciousness, there's a nice question I like to ask, about, well, what is it that sees? Like, how do we know if consciousness, is it in the brain? I think a lot of people have started to come to the idea, or maybe a realization, that it's not just stored in the brain. But I have an example that I really, really like, that I think, well, if you were skeptical, I think this is a deep dive. So there was a study done on people who were born blind. Now, just prior to the real part about the conscious part, just to give a little more context, the interview went quite far. They interviewed a number of people that were born blind and asked about how they dreamt, having not seen the world. And so they expressed that they dreamt in sensory ways outside of sight. So they dreamt in sound and taste and feelings and emotions and touch and things like that. People who became blind later in life, they dreamt in pictures because they'd seen the world. So there were 17 cases of people who were born blind who had never seen the world, who had near-death experiences, and these were all being able to be verified by the people that were there as witnesses. So when they were resuscitated or they came back into their body, they were able to describe what they saw. They were able to describe the room, what the people looked like, all of the things that they saw in their near-death experience. And there was no way they could have ever known that because they'd never seen that. And not only that, I heard about some of those cases then going into the dream time and dreaming in visions rather than in the other senses. Wow. So then what is it that sees, and how does water even play a part in that, and how is that possible? And in the Maori culture, my father is native New Zealand Maori, and there is the word for spirit is wairua. It has many deeper meanings, but a very rudimentary meaning is two waters, because wai means water and rua means two, the spiritual and physical waters. So what is spiritual water? Because I think we have a little idea, or we think we have an idea of spiritual, of physical water. So spiritual water, I think, is more connected to what we might think of as ether and or a vibrational vapor stage. The secrets are all in the subtleties. That's how I learnt my technique, because it's a subtle layer of freezing. And so with this vibrational vapor, I think that whenever people have talked or described spirit, I'm not necessarily talking about ghosts and things like that, people who can see spirit leave the body, then they often describe it in cloud-like or vapor-like. And they don't describe it generally in any other way other than some context relating to a state of water. So I think that it might well be that the spirit, soul, or subtle body is able to leave via a vibrational state of water or ether. And that to me also makes the most sense, because if you pardon the pun and you boil it down, we're water, salts, minerals, and consciousness. Now, the water, people use this term dead water, and I hear people parrot that. But actually, the reality isn't true, because water might get polluted. It might not have great structure when we're looking in that term, but it will always transition from one state to another. It reincarnates all the time for us to see. So the water that we might have in our glass, if we're lucky enough to have it, has gone through the trees and the clouds and the earth and the birds and the bees and our ancestors, and it's managed to find its way to us. When we drink that, we are drinking all the information of everything that has been and everything that will be. But we don't, because I've seen that water isn't stuck in time and space, and we can get into that too. So when you think about death and you think about birth, in birth, water breaks. And in death, water breaks. It breaks out of the body. Water evaporates, and the salts and the minerals are the bones, and eventually they become dust and they go to the ground. Interestingly, when someone is cremated, it's actually salts that are the ashes. So we're made of these sort of immortal things. Water doesn't die, and neither do salt. Now, the salt's an incredible one. You can put it into water, and you don't see it. It helps give water some electrical component, but when the water evaporates, there's the salt, and there it is in its cubic form. Look, and it can grow. And so then we have consciousness, and that is this incredible thing that we all talk about, but unless it's in a body, we don't think it's tangible. But what if everything has actually been staring us in the face all along? And what if it is that water as it's flowing, water as its air state, is in fact a divinity, a divine conscious expression, or holds a divine conscious expression that is actually all around us all the time? And that when we leave this physical body, which gives us all these wonderful emotions and expressions and experiences, but when we leave it, we become perhaps like the observer or a witness. So when I think about one spiritual aspect of water in its more spiritual stage than its physical stage, and I'm only talking about one because I think there are many, I think of it as a witness. Non-judging, but observing. And that then comes into people who have near-death experiences. So when are we not, who have had experiences outside of the body? And I've interviewed many, many people who have had near-death experiences. And very often they have a sense of rising, and then they look upon their body, not even recognizing it to be them, and they become the witness. And then something else happens and they have another experience, but they're experiencing and they're seeing. So I feel like there is a very deep connection between the thing that sees being an all-seeing, all-observing, and actually all-loving essence. And I think that that is what water holds.
So incredible. There's so much to be said about, again, how everything on earth that is alive requires water in order to be alive. And then we were just talking earlier about Eileen McCusick's work with the biofield and that being a plasma, according to Eileen. And then water is really permeating all of the, what appears to be empty space around us, right? And you just start to think about the nature of reality in a totally different way. And I've often told you this, that like I take Eileen's work and your work, and just contextualize it in every way, in every area of my life. Like, how does their work apply to what I'm doing right now, what I'm experiencing right now? Because it just makes you realize there's so much more depth and beauty to this experience and intentionality in this experience than we've been led to believe. And really is beautiful. One thing that I want to circle back to a little bit is tap water and some of the experiments you've done with respect to tap water being in proximity to spring water, or caged eggs being in proximity to pasture-raised eggs. So let's touch on that.
Well, I was inspired to try this because of Luc Montanu's work, with DNA teleportation as such. And I know you've touched on that, so anyone can Google it because it's super interesting. But I was curious about how things impact other things and whether something would happen. So I think even before I did the egg work, I was working with the water. So I had tap water. I also tested its pH or potential or power of hydrogen. And I think for the tap water, it was 6.5, around a 6.5 pH. And then I got spring water that I'd freshly collected. It is important to, when I do this work, to have freshly collected spring water where it's at its highest vibration. And then I took the pH of that, and that was the water that healed me. It was 9.9 out of the ground. And so then I did the crystallography of them both. And the tap water showed disordered patterns, and the spring water formed a very beautiful large hexagonal pattern. I let both of them melt, and I left them overnight side by side. Not touching, just side by side. And in the morning, I refroze them both. But prior to doing that, I tested both of their pH levels to see if anything had changed. The pH 9.9 was the same, but the tap water's pH was up to a 7.3. So there was already something strange had gone on there, very curious. But what I saw is that the structure of the tap water had improved significantly, started to look more like what I might see from a stream or a river. And the beautiful hexagonal pattern that I saw in the spring water, what I actually saw was there's some hexagonal patterns and what I call the lotus in the very first ice image. And a lotus looks like a nest with a kind of lotus shape. Well, what had happened is that there was a second lotus that appeared. So there were two lotuses, and together they created a heart shape. So there was this incredible improvement even in the spring water. And that is not the first time I've seen that happen. And one of the things that I believe that water has as nature, is its nature is to improve things. And the way we improve things is to know our purpose. And when you have a purpose, it actually expands you even further. So what we start to see is that water, very similar to us, can completely expand by being in service. Once during the whole few years that we went through, I was traveling a lot. And I gave this example the other day. And there was a lady sitting next to me she had a cough and she was like sneezing. And everybody was looking at her like she was some kind of leper and like she was going to kill everyone on the plane. And I could feel, I was sitting right next to her. And I had this thought that, oh gosh, I hope I don't get sick. You know, I'm being honest.
Yeah,
I had that thought. And then I thought, oh God, come on, you know better than this. And I thought, this poor woman, how she must be feeling being judged by every single person on this plane. And I'm like, you can help her. So immediately, as soon as I switched that thought to how can I help this poor person? She must be feeling terrible. So I said, can I give you some Reiki? You know, can I get you some water? Like I spent that trip from New Zealand to LA in service to this lady. Not only did she start feeling better, stop coughing, I knew in the moment that I changed my perspective that I would never not get sick, and I never did. And it was just because I stepped into service rather than fear.
Right. It's incredible. The other thing that's so incredible about this, and again, I relate it to Eileen's work, of course, as I naturally do, is that you've shown that the spring water, after being in proximity to the tap water and bringing it into a higher state of coherence, the spring water also has more coherence than it did prior to being in proximity to the tap water. There's some interesting things there that stick out to me, and I'd love to hear you add some more, is that the spring water had to be in a coherent state first in order to, begin to put off this strong coherent field, if you will, that helps overtake and entrain this incoherent field back into coherence. And likewise, I think of us as human beings, we can't help other people. At least we can't effectively help other people if we're, quote, pouring from an empty cup, if you will, which is also a water reference, which is awesome. But it requires that we heal ourselves first. And you said before, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that some of the things that you've done have indicated that water has to heal itself first before it can do work on other bodies of water, so to speak. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I was speaking to an amazing man who sadly recently passed, called Jonathan Butts. And he was an engineer and worked with water in a very unique stage. It was a kind of like a fiery vapor stage where it could actually burn. People often don't think that water can be fire, but it can.
Wow.
And it can burn at like 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's implosion and it's cold. It's remarkable. And during his work in this field with water, he actually and his colleagues discovered that water will always heal itself before it heals its environment. He also said many things which we can touch on, but with this machinery that he was making, with working with this particular stage of water in this fire-like stage, the water taught them how to work with it. And I want to get back. I won't get too distracted from this other aspect because it's important. But he said that as long as they gave the water half an hour every 2 hours to rest, the way it worked was very, very efficient. Like it was fine. But if they just kept it going 24 hours a day, water would give such a big pushback, like a big electrical charge, that it would nearly blow up their $1 million machinery. And when they told other scientists that it would do that, that's not, water can't do that. But I think that's not true. I think actually we don't even know what water really is, which means we don't really know who we are yet. And so he also said that water could read their fields, and they had to step so far back from water for it to actually for them not to
have an impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating. But he was the one that said that water needed to heal itself before it healed its environment. So I really want to give credit to him because he had a lot of amazing work out there, and he created the natural action tech vortexing unit. So coming back to the kind of conscious expression of water and the water's ability to positively impact things and the state of coherence. Well, what's also amazing to me is that once I've had healed water, water that was just what some people might say was destroyed structurally as tap water, and then it's been healed, and then I've put the healed water, and as in healed, it started to heal. It's not the perfect hexagon that has come straight from the spring. It's the healed water, which is just, showing signs of life. And you put that one next to tap water, that one improves the tap water. And you keep on going, and it just keeps on growing and growing and growing and growing. And so we've seen the same thing with eggs. So I was so curious, about fluids that might store information. And I thought, what would be the most naturally informed liquid? And I always thought it would be amniotic fluid. And since that's not so readily available, I thought, well, the next best thing might be egg albumin. And there's two parts to egg white, the gloopy gelatinous part that most people understand and seen and cooked with. And then there is the thinner, more saliva-like part. So when you just crack an egg open before you let everything out, just a little bit, this thin saliva-like part comes out. And when you freeze that for about 12 minutes with free-range fresh, they need to be fresh, happy hen eggs, you tend to find 6 patterns. At the very least, you're going to see 5, and one of them will be this volcano pattern. It looks like this 3-dimensional kind of volcano with a flower in the middle, and it's very distinctive.
What do you think that represents?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I really don't know, but it's such a distinctive design. It's very primordial, with this kind of like changing, and even like in the Hawaiian beliefs, there's all these different types of water, and one of them includes lava. Think of lava as a water, as like a plasma, right?
Yeah.
And so lots to learn about that. Right. But then then what we found was that cage 10 eggs could only form 2 of those 6 patterns, and the 2 most rudimentary ones. And some of them don't form any of them. It just kind of a jelly forms and freezes. So in a similar way to putting tap water next to spring water, what I did was my first one was to put a free-range egg next to a cage 10 egg side by side and leave them overnight. I had no idea if anything would happen. It was just curious. And so then I did controls to see, okay, this batch of cage 10 eggs kind of seems to be disordered, and all these free-range eggs seem to have a similar look. So it's not me putting consciousness into them. This isn't like that. I've done thousands of these. People have done many around the world who I've taught. It's the signature pattern of eggs. It's what their imprint looks like. And so I put them side by side, and when I did the crystallography, I saw that the free-range egg had not been impacted at all, beautiful as ever. But what we saw was the cage 10 egg, and after having done over 1,000 by that time of cage 10 eggs, having never seen more than 2 patterns, I actually saw 4 patterns. And it blew me away. And then I shared it on social media, and everyone was like, oh, yeah, that's cool. But like, what if you're surrounded by bad eggs? It's going to go bad for sure, which was kind of good that they said that, because it inspired me to go ahead and actually discover more, because it's like interesting when you see a collective think a certain way. And so I did that, and I put a free-range egg, and I did controls for all of them, free-range egg in the middle, surrounded by a whole same batch of cage 10 eggs, and I left them all overnight. And then I did the crystallography. And some might think, oh yeah, it's definitely going to affect that good egg. But the free-range egg, its crystallography was absolutely beautiful. It hadn't been negatively impacted whatsoever. All 6 patterns were there. The big volcano was happily there. But the the cage 10 eggs, all of them, there was healing by proximity. The ones that were the closest to the free-range egg had improved significantly so that they looked like free-range eggs. The ones further away had improved, but not quite as much. So then I repeated it, and I got the same results. And I've actually repeated it multiple times. I've repeated it with 24 eggs around it. And my next one is to actually get someone to help me and have, one beautiful free-range egg in the middle and put, I don't know, like 100 around it to see what will happen.
Yeah.
And I think what we're really seeing is that if you put it in terms of humans and you look at a huge percentage of water that egg albumin actually is, that if you heal yourself, you naturally heal others. And that even when you begin healing yourself, you begin to start to help heal others. Just this beginning, just starting, making a shift. And that shift, I always say, you can change your life with a change of perspective. Yeah. And that's where things start. And even with the healing of the tap water, by putting it to my heart or playing some sound frequency or whatever it is, and you see the structures improve, even that, you start to see that no matter how messed up things can be, that is where healing begins in a state of gratitude. What I actually see is water not only feeling better, but showing gratitude within its structural information. And any healing starts with an attitude of gratitude, not looking at what everything is wrong, but looking at even if it's one thing that's right. And the fact that we can think gives us an amazing opportunity to shift our perspective towards just a little light. And I think that is actually, light is the way in which water receives and shares information, because water is a container of photonic light. And we don't think about that, but actually that's a truth. It's a huge little container, and it's a huge little container of photonic light. And that means that we have trillions of water molecules in our cells that absorb light. And when you are communicating with water, so there's another thing to address. It's like, am I communicating with water, or is water communicating with itself?
I know.
And and we get extremely attached to the physical body.
Right.
But in many indigenous cultures, water is a living being. Water never was called water. In the old days, it was called the waters.
The waters.
The waters, because it was considered a living expression of life, of a being.
And we are aspects of the waters.
We are.
Yeah.
And then it got reduced to water when Romans put plumbing into being, and people started to see their waste being taken away with water.
Wow.
And then it gets reduced to H2O. But even H2O is interesting because you have two hydrogens, which are feminine in the mode of levity, and a large oxygen, which is in the mode of gravity and masculine. And together they create this amazing balance and liquid water on Earth. And so even within that, there's more, but we don't say the waters unless it's you hear it biblically. But there is a trickling down of our old knowledge in the English language where we say her waters broke. We don't say her water broke, we say her waters broke.
Yeah.
There's some remembering of water as sacred. There aren't I don't know of any indigenous or creation stories that don't involve water. Water is mentioned 722 times in the Bible, more than faith, worship, and love. There is the part where it said, the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the deep. And that deep is the waters. And then, then there was the sound, then there was the light. And the sound was the word, and the light, let there be light. And all of these things are what create life and information. So a lady once said to me, she's an indigenous woman, that she could speak to bees. And I spoke about this at a biology physics conference, and I was hoping that, it would go over okay. And actually every single person there kind of lit up, because it in their work, it meant something. And she said that she would watch their hives for long periods of time until eventually a bee came out and communicated however it did and said, we don't mind you looking at our hive, but please don't look at it for such a long time, because your conscious expression is putting too much light in the hive and we like it to be darker. So where we put our conscious expression is where we're also putting our light. So that's why I often suggest, where are you putting your light? Because you're giving it also a power. And so with water, which is, again, a container of photonic light, when we are expressing ourselves, whether it's emotionally, mentally, verbally, whatever that is, even light comes out of our eyes, then there is an information exchange. And that comes into Gennady Krokolev's work, which he was a Russian scientist and psychiatrist.
So crazy. I was just about to ask you this.
Oh, good. Yeah, so interesting. And what I loved about his work is that he showed something in some commonality to my work. He had learnt about a magazine which in Russian came out to something like See the Other Way Around. And there was an article in it that he had read about the retina of the eye, which is mostly this fourth phase plasmic water that is able to project a kind of hologram which can be photographed coming from a very clear vision in the mind's eye. And Gennady was working with psychiatric patients for 20 years. And I've seen videos. It's very, very hard to find his work. And there's reasons for that. Gennady actually rang his brother and he said, I've just discovered something that would change the world. And this was, after he'd been doing all the work I'm about to tell you. And then 3 hours later, his brother got to his house and he was found hanging. So very, very suspicious.
Wow.
And all of his work was confiscated and just kind of made very, very difficult to find. And so I've managed to find some of his examples of his work. So I saw a video before it was taken off. I have a friend who's Russian that enabled me to help find some things on him. And in a very calm space, he would get one of his patients, and he did this with over 200 patients over the course of 20 years. And he would calmly ask them questions. He'd made these kind of goggles that looked like scuba diving goggles without the lens. And he had something called a Zenith camera. It's a black and white camera that had this kind of long box thing. And he managed to attach the lens, not the lens, but the goggles to the box thing of the camera. And so they wore this, and then he would say, well, just tell me when you're seeing something, when you're having one of your visions,
eye, right?
Or, well, no, they were different. They were actually having hallucinations.
Got it. Okay.
So for them, this was as real as anything.
Got it. Okay.
Which made it very potent.
Yeah.
Because they could swear to you that they were seeing things. They were seeing people or imagery.
Yeah.
And so when they said that, he would take the photo. And out of the 200 people that he worked with, 117 of them were able to confirm that the black and white images that he took of their eyes as they were having a vision were in fact what they were seeing. And now this was repeated by more Russian scientists within the last 20 years. And instead of using people that had issues, they worked with someone who could remote view. And they used a scuba diving mask, took the lens out, same exact setup, same kind of camera. And the scientist stood behind a wall and held up numbers and shapes. And as she tuned into what she could see in her mind's eye, they would then take photos of her eyes. And they proved that they could show, you could see the triangle, you could see a number 1, you could see, these images. And all of them tried it. The key was that you have a mental vision, like a clear vision in your mind's eye, or else it wouldn't work. And all of them did it, and they did a documentary called something along the lines of "Thought is Material, It's Proven." And it's all in Russian, but there is English subtitles. Now, there were two schools of thought as to how this was happening, one more popular than the other. Gennady, interestingly, was more inclined to go for the more unpopular idea that there is potentially a secondary realm of consciousness that perhaps certain animals see that we don't, and that is in our realm but we don't see. But the much more popular idea is that the brain sends information to the fourth phase water of the retina of the eye, and that translates the information into picture form, which is projected out like a hologram, which is what is being photographed. The key with that was that there was this clear vision, whereas for my work, actually what I see is that water is more interested in what I'm feeling than what I'm thinking. So it's reading almost like it reads all of the fields, but it's actually picking up on the one that it's most in alignment with, and that I think is emotions.
Wow.
And so if I'm doing work with, say, I did a situation where I'm doing a lot of different work with different plants, and I'm putting different flowers and then taking it out and seeing if it designs the flowers. And I'd been working on that project for a while, but this one day I was deeply upset about something. I was genuinely really, really sad. And water would not do any flower things with me. All it did all day was show me sad faces.
Mm.
And it was just showing me that it saw me. So I felt seen. I felt like I had a friend that actually was so much more interested in what I was feeling, not willing to do any small talk and just do this crystallography, because it's not like that.
Mm.
You know, we talk about imprinting water. We talk about controlling water. This is what we do. Mm. This is what we've been doing for so long, right. Pulling things apart and trying to figure out how best they will serve us. And what we're doing here and what we talk about is imprinting water for our health. I tend to see things a little bit like Trinity and see the other way around. Mm. So our saliva is the first liquid that water comes into contact with when we drink it. It is the welcoming committee, if you will. And it holds the information of the last word or sentence you spoke. After having done various works with different bodily fluids, including saliva, I've seen that there is an imprint relative to the last word you spoke in the saliva when you freeze it. And so rather than it being all about what that water can do for you, because my number one question is, what water should I drink? Mm. And I can give two examples. One is where someone who was very wealthy was able to get the best, in their opinion, the most pristine, amazing glacial water, fourth phase stage, and drink all of that, and just assume that because they were drinking that type of water, it was best for them, it was going to heal them. There was this kind of like assumption that just because it was the best, it would heal them. And then I knew a lady who was very unwell, and all she could afford was filtered tap water. And she drank that with so much gratitude. And she would always give thanks. She would always say some kind of little blessing. And it makes me feel emotional. But what she did was that even though she was not well in her body at the time, she had this understanding and this true depth that she had heard me say, you're the welcoming committee. What environment do you want water to enter so it can work its real, true, greatest expression on you? One of our greatest expressions as human beings is to be loving and kind and grateful. And I think when we start at the very, very beginning to just be grateful for the breath, grateful for this incredible intelligence that moves through our body. The fact that we're sitting here, our hearts are beating. Everything is working. We're blinking, we're not thinking about it. All of the actions of the body that we don't even really think about, that we take for granted, are all happening. And just to be grateful, to be able to have thought to actually be grateful at all. And then we have the resonance, the feeling that comes with this deep feeling. So she would just be grateful, deeply grateful, and say, if you were wanting to welcome a child into the world and your world looked like absolute chaos, and you're like, this child is so pure, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And in amongst the chaos, you hold that child, your instincts kick in, and you just rock it. You just rock. And you calm the child because you calm yourself. And that whole process is natural to us. So if you think of this water, even if it is only filtered water and that was all you have, that filtered water, that also has its own energetic expression coming into a body of gratitude, a welcoming. I think of water not as a resource but as a relative. You know, we're ignoring the relative at our door if we just assume that it's just going to do everything. We're going to need to get the best this and the best that and the best the other, and that's going to help me. If we just turn it the other way around and think, what environment do I want so the highest expression of the spirit of water can enter me and grow? That's truly where we see the most miraculous healing. And she recovered so quickly from what was going on for her. It was amazing. And yet the person who was just getting the best water and spending money trying to think that the best of what is termed as the best would heal them, it didn't happen so quick. There was at least an awareness to drink water which, you know, was in a coherent state in the beginning, but at the same time there wasn't the relational interaction. And when I think about water, I think about the different relationships we have. You know, we have a kind of family relationship, and we have a lover-beloved relationship, and we have the parent-child relationship, and then we have friend-friend, and then we have other more just kind of we just interact with people we don't really know, but we kind of have something. And so with what I like to suggest in terms of relationship with water and how to approach this, I would say that if you go to a petting zoo, like a little farm where you can go and see the animals, and you can pet the sheep and the rabbit and the deer. Oh, they're so cute. And, you know, I mean, and the little piggies and all of that. And then you go away and you think, oh, that was so much fun. They're so cute. And then you've done, and you carry on and you don't think about it too much the next day. And you compare that feeling with going into a forest and you just kind of really feeling into being there, and you're just open to anything. You're just like, oh, you're just happy to be there. And then you see a deer, and that you see that deer sees you, and there's this kind of thrill that it's sort of close to you, and then that deer starts to approach you. Even maybe you get to touch it, or maybe it's a rabbit and it comes near you, or a little squirrel, or any creature, and it gives you this incredible thrill. And the only difference is that it's wild, and that you have created an environment for it to approach you because it feels safe. And the way that makes you feel is so different than the way you feel about the animals in the farm, because they couldn't go anywhere. And so water is wild. And it approaches you the way that you approach it, but it reads our potentials for good. And this is also one of the things I've really enjoyed about my work, and it's water's work with me. I can't really take so much credit. And that when I put a sunflower seed into the water and remove it, it designs the outcome of the seed. It doesn't design the seed, it designs the sunflower. Same thing with an apple seed. Same thing with a flax seed. And so when I put an empty pistachio shell in the water, it just designed the empty pistachio shell. And I would suggest, given that there are trillions of water molecules in our bodies, actively waiting for us to step into our potential, because water has already seen it and is ready to be it. Not our potential for bad, but our potential for good. Because water won't design for me if I am angry or frustrated, which doesn't happen that often, but I'm a real person and it does happen. Right. So in those spaces, I actively actually do work to see what will happen. Water will never design in complex imagery for me when it does that. And that brings me into conscious technology.
If you're enjoying this episode, please consider sharing it with at least one friend or family member who you think could benefit from hearing it. You help us grow and reach more people by sharing it with those around you. Also, be sure to head to the show notes to check out our membership offerings, membership marketplace, and more. We all know that Big Ag is poisoning our food supply, and Big Pharma's so-called medicine is straight up poison. What most people aren't aware of, though, is that most supplements are also filled with artificial sweeteners, dyes, GMOs, glyphosate, and a host of other toxic ingredients, even many of the more natural supplements. My good buddy James Benefico dedicated his life to crafting the world's cleanest, most nutritious organic supplements after a pre-workout energy drink caused heart palpitations so severe that he almost landed up in the ER. Organic Muscle was born, revolutionizing sports nutrition by using exclusively non-GMO ingredients from USDA organic farms. Since then, tens of thousands of people, including myself, have leveled up their fitness and their health with Organic Muscle's award-winning natural pre-workout. There's no jitters, no heart palpitations, no itchy skin, just nourishing organic food and herb-based ingredients for clean, sustained energy, strength, endurance, and recovery. Numerous studies have shown that Tonka Ali is the most effective herb in the world for naturally boosting testosterone levels. And we know that testosterone levels are depleting all over the world because of what's put in the food supply, what we're exposed to. Organic Muscle has the world's first fully organic Tonka Ali supplement. I only support and promote things that I actually use, and I can say I legitimately use Organic Muscle products. Use code FORWARD15 at checkout for 15% off at organicmuscle.com. I'm always thinking about things in terms of what's actually happening in the body with this process of being, your saliva being the welcoming party and being in a genuine state of gratitude. And again, what's so incredible about what you just said too is like it has to be a genuine state of gratitude. It can't be like a forced, intellectualized, like mental masturbation form. It has to be a legitimate state of gratitude inside. But when that happens, you could say that maybe our water in our bodies, because our bodies are made of water, is becoming more coherent. And what is coherent water? It's fourth phase water. What does fourth phase water do? It pushes impurities out. So your body's coming into a state of being able to push impurities out better. That's why this woman, or virtually anyone who's consistently expressing gratitude, they have profound healing. And I won't say it's irrespective of what else they're doing. Obviously, they're doing these other things, certain diet, moving their body more, et cetera, et cetera. But the gratitude itself has such a profound impact because we are made of water. So then when we have this tap water and we're feeling gratitude, we're expressing gratitude for it, we're bringing that water into coherence. And then we come into this intimate relationship with that water, given that we have brought ourselves into coherence, we're bringing it into coherence, and then we drink it and it is hydrating us. And now we're in this intimate relationship with tap water. And it's such an important recontextualization or reframe because, I even do that sometimes still where, and I've heard you say this, where it's like, oh, tap water, no, I don't want to do that. That's gross. Or that, what does that have in it? And I also just wonder, given that we're bringing that tap water back into coherence, knowing what we know about, let's say, as an example, I always bring this one up, a chicken does not have enough calcium in its diet to produce an egg with as much calcium as is it in its shell, meaning that there's some transmutation process that happens within the chicken as it is producing this egg to create calcium, right? And that can be applied in several areas of biology. But the point being that I wonder, and be interested to maybe have you do this work at some point, if after this water has been brought into coherence, this tap water that does have chlorine, fluoride, and all these chemicals in it, if there's at the least a lesser amount of fluoride and chlorine in it after it's been brought back into coherence, because it may undergo this process of alchemy, It'd be really interesting to see, studies done on that. But at the least, we were talking before this, it's possible that with your freezing method of now this water being more coherent, you freeze it to where there's still a little bit of liquid on top. And we know that, again, fourth phase water pushes out the impurities. So maybe this frozen version of tap water has pushed the impurities out, and that's sitting in the layer above. So if you just dump that layer of water out very gracefully, because it is still water and we still love it. But that water that's sitting there in that Petri dish is then like a more pure form of exclusion zone fourth phase water or coherent water. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know I just threw a lot at you there. So
no, actually, I talk about that. So, I mean, that's why there's certain characteristics of that fourth phase water that you're talking about. And it's sort of a liquid crystal. And so there's such a short amount of freezing that actually what we see is that the separation. So with the separation, there's liquid on top and ice underneath. The ice layer actually is incredibly thin, it's incredibly clear. So that's the really interesting part, is that one of the reasons that when you have frozen ice, it can be cloudy is because of those impurities, or those minerals, or those salts. But water freezes in 3 stages, 3 main stages. And I liken them to spirit, blood, and body. So the spirit stage is the stage with the liquid on top and ice underneath, where you tip the liquid away. You can tip it into another Petri dish and extend the conversation on. And that water has already just started to change a little bit, and our plants really, really love it. And so then you have the stage in between. It looks like an ice sandwich where there's 2 layers of ice with water in the middle. You know you've overfrozen it when that happens, but that's like more like the blood stage.
Wow.
And then the solid is where you have the clouding over, because it's frozen as a solid. So if there's any minerals or anything in there, it will have clouded it over. So the very first stage, it is at its most clear. It is a negatively charged, which is what we want. Mm-hmm. It is clear, so it has pushed the solids out. The reason it's negatively charged is because it's pushed all the solids out of itself, which creates the positive charge. And then you have this clarity. And so what we've discovered, and my children taught me this, actually, with this very quick, short, and fun crystallographic method, which anyone can do. My daughter was watching me. I was holding a dish up to the light to take a photo. It was really pretty. And she said, "Oh, can I have that, Mummy?" And I gave it to her, and she started to eat the ice. I'm like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she says, "It's good for me, Mummy." And I'm like, "Really?" And then a few weeks later, her brother, Rama, did the same thing. Didn't know that Shanti had done it.
Wow.
Then I started teaching parents my technique, and they would come to me and say, "Our children, they keep eating the ice." I'm like, what do these children know that we don't, or have forgotten? We don't know if we've forgotten. And so then my husband, who was curious about working with my technique using words, and the power of words are very real, and the written word even. And so he would write the words of different plant medicines, and he even went into their molecular compositions and various different things, and he would work on one each week. And he was using the word ayahuasca. Actually, he helped me find a hydroglyph. Now, I talked about the signature patterns. I've talked about art. Hydroglyphs are essentially symbols in ice that I need to have seen repeat at least 50 times over the course of multiple months. And that means that, and I've used a word influence. And the reason that I used a word influence is it's one of our most reduced, quickest forms of expressing. So you can see a tree in all its complexities and feel the tree, but if we've written it, it's somehow managed to get to the actual written word stage. It's no longer a picture form, it's a word stage. So it's almost like water isn't reading words. And I don't just use English, I've used the same word in multiple languages and have a team of people doing this, where we actually see the same symbol appear using the same word influence and see the same symbol. It's like water reverse engineers this word to a living principle, which can even be eaten. So when Ryan was using the word ayahuasca and taking the photograph, he discovered a hydroglyph visionary. That's what we would see for these different plant medicines. We would see a hydroglyph with the energetic meaning of visionary show up, which looks kind of like an eye.
Wow.
Which is why I called it Ryan's eye, because if anyone finds a hydroglyph, I'd name it after them. And so, but he would eat the ice afterwards. And he ate the ice every day for about a week. He did this. And after a while, after he came to me and he said, I do actually think I need to take this a little more seriously, because he'd started having very lucid dreams. He had very, very mild expressions of an ayahuasca journey.
Wow.
And that got me really interested. And I started to share his story with people that were learning my freezing method. And I said, well, if does anyone have anything they'd like to try it with? And there were a number of people that had insomnia. So many people seem to have trouble sleeping. And so the word you use comes from the well of knowledge within you. It may not even actually make logical sense as to why you're writing it. An example might be, before I came to America, just recently, I had a really bad headache, and I thought I was inspired to do this. So I thought, what's the word? And I felt, what's the word? And the word was purple. So I was like, okay, I wrote the word purple, and it designed this image, and I just eat whatever the crystallography looks like. And within 5 minutes, my headache was gone. It was like, what? And so I had these people writing the word rest and eating the ice. It usually takes a week, but it can sometimes be shorter. It seems to vary. And over the course of the last, I guess, 2 years since sharing this, I've had over 100 people try this and come back to me with some comment of improvement. And you're eating liquid crystal ice. It is the fourth phase as such of water. And you are eating water that has, and what's different is that different from putting water, liquid water, and giving it love, because water molecularly is updating its information somewhere in the region of every trillionth of a second. I don't know how they know that number, but it's in a kind of molecular chaos. But as it slows down, before it's a solid, it comes into order, goes from chaos to order, and it slows down and is in this very creative space. So it takes the information. So people will say, well, how is it if water is so chaotic? If it's in such chaos, how can it be picking up on anything?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be picking up on every other thing in its environment, and its bonds are constantly breaking. It doesn't make sense. Well, to me, it's like the hydrogen picking up on the conscious expression and feeding the oxygen.
Wow.
And with each break, it gives it more and more information. And so then I'm like, well, mate, that might be the very reason it can store information. But when you think about it in terms of, instead of molecular chaos, I spoke to somebody who was a quantum physicist, and he said, yeah, there's a big difference between molecular chaos and molecular excitement. If molecules are excited, they become in more of a coherent space, and they become more excited about something. But when you start to freeze that and see that, it has actually become in form with that information. And when you are actually taking it, seeing it, so you have the sight, you have the tangibility of form, and then in that melting stage, you're eating stages in that fourth phase water, you're actually really taking on in the information. So it's a whole different level again.
In
And
form.
our children taught us this.
That's incredible.
They're the water bearers of the future.
Yeah, that is incredible. It's just so amazing. You write gratitude in Spanish or in English, and it shows the 6-pointed leaf, right?
With the gratitude, yes.
Yeah, with gratitude.
Yeah.
But it's just so crazy that that's already incredible, right?
Mm-hmm.
That water has this symbol-based language that you call hydroglyphs, but then that actually can produce material results, if you will, if you eat the ice, because it has the energetic imprint,
Mm-hmm.
the signature of gratitude imbued in it. It's not just like, oh, here's a word. It's like,
Yeah.
no. This is the expression of gratitude that can inform your water in your body to express more gratitude. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, it's mind blowing.
It is. It's incredible. And we see that there are multiple words that seem to interrelate that are represented by one symbol. So it's incredibly complex. And when we have had people write, an example might be, I don't know, like water. And when you write that in Hebrew, Hebrew is a really complex language, and each letter has deep depth, let alone when it's all put together. So we'll see the symbol, but we'll actually see other hieroglyphs that we're still working on. So there is an understanding that that is a much bigger meaning.
Mm.
And sometimes we'll see a signature pattern, an artistic expression, and hieroglyphs in one dish. And I think that hieroglyphs are things I need help with, because I've been working on that for 5 years now. And to do one, it's a 50 times. And some people will say, well, it's just you.
I was just about
It's
to say
just
this.
you, and you have this thing, and you're writing the word, and you're expected to see that. Well, we have other people doing it.
Right. This is the important point. I brought this up with Dr. Mark Bailey, who's also from New Zealand, because someone had tried to tear apart a presentation I gave because I falsified virology, and then I went into your work afterwards, and they were like, these people like have this big thing where they, are very strict in making virology adhere to the scientific method, and then they transition into water memory. And what Mark's response was to that, he and I did a video together, he said, as far as I'm concerned, Veda's work is empirical evidence because it's repeatable and observable across countless people. And she's doing control experiments and things like this. And again, the point is, other people are repeating the same exact work you're doing and getting the same results, and other people are informing your process, and then you're getting those results, and like, oh, that's what this means.
And I actually approach this simply that I found something really cool that I think is incredible, and I encourage people to give it a go and help me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm actually from the perspective of, I'm a researcher. Yes, I'm an artist, and I'm a person, and I'm a mother, and I'm all of these different things, but I'm the same as you because we are bodies of water and light.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all get to help each other. So I invite the science community and I invite the conscious community to come into this coherent state, which I think is like art. Art's where you get to ask a different question. If you look at it as art, then I'm not saying I'm disregarding any of the other things, but art's where you can look at something and not ask, how is this possible, but ask, what does this mean to me?
Mm-hmm.
It's a very different approach.
Yeah.
And I definitely don't have all the answers, but I would say that water has answered many things for me that feel right for me.
Mm.
And with the hydroglyphs, I've done one side by side where I see, say, for example, I write the word creation here, and perhaps I have the word completion here, and we see the different symbols, and I've used the same water. And then when I do nothing, I see nothing. And is it every time, or is it 1 in every 10, or is it 1 in every 1,000? I think it's important to express that. Mm. If I'm not in coherence, if I'm frustrated or just sometimes even exhausted, and sometimes my exhaustion I can get occasionally a little bit cranky. Mm-hmm. And so water won't design imagery in that space because it knows I need rest. So it's like, it's not judging me. It's just not, in that level of, it's not at that frequency.
Right.
And so, but for the most part, this happens practically every time. It used to be 1 in 10, but as my relationship became more, I'm talking about relationship and kind of circling back to it, when you meet somebody and you're really attracted to them and you want to know them and you're studying their face and you want to show, very often people are showing their best side of themselves. My husband and I joke about it sometimes into some of the things that if we'd known that we did, that we know now.
Same way with Kylie and I, but we still love each other, so that's great. We're still working out, right?
Yeah. And then you eventually get to another stage where, you're sharing in the bathroom together or can wake up and, your hair looks like crazy. Your breath could kill a goat. kind of a deal.
Literally snored all night and I still love you.
And all that.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of the relationship I have with water. So people will often have this misunderstanding that I am, creating like this beautiful meditational space, and I always do that. And I'm like constantly like trying to make everything perfect. My life, I have 3 children, and we have a cat. And we have stuff and life and the world. And
you struggle to leave the house because you have 3 kids.
Put
like that.
Oh my God. And then, New Zealand, I swear to God, is the land of 1 million lawnmowers. And so there's always something going on when I'm trying to do a podcast or we're trying to do the work.
Right.
And so I think it's really nice for people to kind of know that water meets you where you're at. And that if you actually are in relationship with a family member, there isn't the airs and graces or the masks that we might wear in public. And water isn't seeing you the way that others see you. Water isn't even seeing you in the way that you see yourself yet. I think if we could see ourselves the way that water sees us, we would feel so differently about ourselves and about the world. And I think that this is one way where even for me, I've had times where I've seen water when I've asked water to reflect me. And I've seen water design the most incredibly beautiful patterns. And it is so humbling. And I still, although I'm getting better, can still struggle to even look in the mirror through my 4th phase water eye mirrors and be able to even say, you're beautiful. And to why is that even hard? When my daughter, for example, when she was 3, she was running around the room, jumping on the bed, going, I love myself so much. And it made me so happy. And then we get into the conditioning that happens from school and how you're supposed to look and what beauty is and all that stuff. And she comes to me and she says, do you think my nose is big? It breaks your heart. The world is not an easy place to be. And we're here because of that reason. We're here because we get to learn to love ourselves despite all of that. And we get to actually learn that that's a truth, that there is within us something that makes us so unique that the world would not look the same if we weren't here.
Just like you talk about with tap water being one of the things that has taught you so much about water itself, and we have this perception that tap water is bad, right? It's the same with life experiences, and that's what came up for me as you were saying it. It's like I have this t-shirt that I wear and it says grateful for it all, and I genuinely mean that. I genuinely mean that. Now, if I'm in the middle of a stressful situation, it's probably a little bit harder for me to get to that point, but a few days later, I've become so good at taking situations and working through the emotions with them, and then really just questioning, like, what can I learn from this? How is this informing me now? Or getting on the backside of it and like, wow, that happened and it was horrible, but it led me to this, and I wouldn't be here if it weren't for that. And so when it comes to these, quote, negative situations in life, I am truly grateful for them. And I almost welcome them. I was talking about that with Amanda last night. I welcome these negative situations now because I know that it is going to be a beautiful teacher for me.
Yeah, I remember my son, we spent so long, we were building this Lego plane. And like, God, it took us ages. And finally it was done. I was like, oh my God, we finally got the pinnacle of Legodom. It was like incredible. I was so happy. And you know what he did? he jumped on it, and like all the Lego pieces went everywhere.
Oh, no.
And you know what it did? It enabled us to actually recreate something new that out of his imagination of what we could make that didn't follow the instructional manual. And every time we break, we have all these building blocks to create something new that is more aligned to who we are now. And we all break sometimes. And that doesn't mean we're broken. It just means we have more opportunity to start again. And that can be really hard when you're exhausted and you've spent so long building that Lego plane. But if we find the time and space to actually see it in a slightly different way and then consciously build from there, we have our own, I think of a dense mind and the light mind. The dense mind just tends to be things we regurgitate, the things that we've been remembering that aren't healthy for us or that we just do because they're comfortable. And then the light mind is where we have divine inspiration. I often get that in the shower, when I'm in the water, and it's like, oh, that's a good idea. Where'd that idea come from? And just kind of act upon that. And there's quite a difference in the way those things feel. And so when we I will kind of come back around to when people ask me what I like to drink. I love to drink spring water. I love to know where it came from, because just in the similar way to where we are desensitized from our food, then we're also often desensitized from our water.
Right.
And people can go to find a spring, and go and find the nearest spring to them. And tap water, yes, it can have multiple things in it that aren't ideal. That's not the water's fault. It still has a living principle. It still has an energy there. It's like a sick person that is waiting to heal. And we do see that even through a carbon filter, improves it structurally and starts to filter some of that out. If I have a choice, and I'm able to, in New Zealand, we're very fortunate. I'm able to go to multiple springs and collect water. But if I was going to on a healing experience, I would always choose a natural spring water to drink. Because I think in these times where we're leaning towards, organic and GMO free and all of these things for the food and really going for that, and yet using certain machines to make our water alkaline. Because I was shocked when I came to America, and the majority of people that I spoke to assumed that alkaline water was ionized water. And in New Zealand, it's like alkaline water simply means water that has a natural alkalinity, which is most of the water that comes from springs. And it also has a negative oxidation reduction potential. And so when you can make those things through a machine and say, well, it's saving on this and it's saving on that, it lacks the natural composition of the salts and minerals. It lacks the living principle of where the water, what the water is like in its living state. I say living because the hydroglyph for living and gratitude is the same as the signature pattern of pristine spring water.
Wow.
And when I simply asked, because I've got no one paying me to do anything, I can just do whatever I want because I want to. And I just simply asked water, well, what is a hydroglyph? I just coining at that. I think I've heard that term before. It's just what I call it.
It makes sense because it's a water message rather than a hieroglyph water glyph.
It showed me two hydroglyphs, the message glyph and the living glyph. And it's saying it's living messages. So the fact that it defines itself as a living message, not just a message, even it really kind of shows this living crystallography that you can eat as a living message. So you're not just having, a conversation with water. Water is also becoming you. And so all of that is going inside of you, and you feel it. You do feel a change. This one lady, she was healing, and she has a big list of words that she's used and eaten every day. No matter what it looked like, what water showed her, she trusted that water doesn't make mistakes. Water is also like a lie detector test. And so she would eat it, and she was started with the word connection and did that for a long time. She'd had a really serious vaccine injury, and she at one point could hardly walk. And so she'd come across this as an idea, and she just resonated for her. She was doing some other movement, different kind of therapies and stuff, and she was really sick. And after 9 months of doing this and a pile of words this big, she's completely well. And I'm not saying that that was the only thing she did. She did the work. She did, various other modalities, but that was her almost meditation every morning that she did. She noticed that the filtered tap water she used started off really spiky in its crystallography and end up as the creation glyph almost every time. The water went from not tasting particularly nice to tasting sweet as her relationship with water changed. And one day, halfway through all of this, something happened where she wrote the word, something about fragility or like non-fragile or something like that. And because that word fragile was in there, words are powerful.
Right.
She went out and she was feeling good, and she was actually on a hike. She went to some water and she was trying to like go into, and she ended up falling and broke her toe.
Oh, wow.
And then she realized, oh my God, I just drank fragile, and then she went back and she knew exactly how to heal by using the words that felt right. And so it was really probably exactly what she needed to see to realize the power is within her. It's water speaking to water, and it's amplified by the electrical charge of the salt and by the information of light.
Incredible. Okay. I cut you off, I think, like 30 minutes ago on the water technology piece. So let's circle back to that now, the water technology.
Well, there's a few pieces. One is that I recently did a webinar, and this lovely American, and I think she was actually, I can't remember all of where she came from. I think partly it was from Spain and also maybe Mexico. Anyway, she had this wonderful idea and thought and belief that clouds hold our memories. And she thinks that as humans, we have this, internal knowing of our internal water's information, and that we are pulling it out of ourselves through our ideas and thoughts and creating it in the world, which is why we've created the cloud to store this technological information. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And then a while ago, Dr. Gerald Pollack was talking on one of my other webinars, and he was talking about fourth phase water, this kind of, unique plasma gel-like water. And he was talking about another scientist who was able to reduce and reduce and reduce, or perhaps I should say concentrate, this fourth phase water, which eventually didn't dissipate or evaporate, but became a kind of crystal powder. And this crystalline powder, or tiny little crystals, they were able to then, they're working on the technology to put that into something like a USB drive. And it can store more information than anything we have now. And one of the things I want to add, and perhaps we can start wrapping up with, is, because I find this very inspiring. Not only did Jonathan Butts talk about water needing to heal itself before it heals the environment, and that kind of laser-like water flame stage, but he also was talking about him and all of his colleagues from what they observed with water said, and he wrote a piece in my upcoming new book as well about this, is that water is not just, we talk about water memory, right? this idea of water having memory, and we are bodies of water that have memory. Well, what is the point of having memory? The point is that we learn from our memory. And he said that water is the most incredible self-learning essence in anything that we know, and it is far more advanced than the most advanced AI we have now. And what I would say to really support that would be my studies on 5G. So when it first came out, I used spring water as my control. That sounds so horrible, used and control.
I know.
But you know what I mean.
I know. Yeah. From a scientific context, use it as a control. Right.
And so I did the crystallography. I let that melt. I went and then I put the melted water by the 5G tower for 15 minutes, brought it back, refroze it, and saw there was a shock wave. So it was originally beautiful, geometry of a 6-sided star, and then it was complete disorder, which concerned me. And then I let that melt and refroze it, and I just saw that you can only do that for about 6 to 7, maybe 8 times if you're lucky, depending on how much water you put in, because you're always tipping a little off. Mm. It was just kind of destroyed for a really long time. And I was pretty worried about that. But 2 years ago, I went to the exact same water source, used the exact same 5G tower, was still there, did the exact same thing. And I saw a shock wave. But the very next melt and refreeze, I saw 2 hydroglyphs in the water. The message glyph and the information glyph. Mm. Then I let that melt. The next refreeze, I saw geometries that were so much more, even more beautiful and coherent than the very first one from spring water. Wow. Water had informed itself and learned how to use that energy to actually become even more beautiful. And we are, again, by molecular count, 99% water. And we are, if we think about our lives, we always have to think back to our memories. I think about my life and I can tell you, oh, this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. And I'm explaining it to you based off my experience of it, based off my memories, which I have because of the water within me. So we are bodies of water, salts and minerals, consciousness. We are bodies of water, memory. We are bodies of memories. And right now, this right now moment is where we have right now. Mm. But water isn't confined to time and space. And so what we see is that if we are a body full of memories, and these memories, they mean so much to us because that makes up our life, the memories of our family, of our children, of our hardships, of our good things and bad things, and all the rest of it that make us us. Then, when you pass away, and I've sadly had multiple people pass away that are very dear to me, I think the one thing that I would say is be a beautiful memory in the heart of someone. Mm. And when you pass on, you will always be that beautiful memory in their hearts. And if memories are actually what make up our living life, you won't ever really die. Mm. That person's never left you if they still are in your memory body. And I don't think we're ever alone. From the perspective of water, there is no death. Right. A man reached out to me and he said, can you please use the word death? Because I've only been given 3 months to live. Can you show me what water shows for the word death? When I did that, all I could see was the hydroglyph for living over and over and over and over again. And then I realized, of course, water doesn't die. From its perspective. There is no death. There's only transition. And when water is boiling in a pan, before it boils, it has all these squiggly lines, which are like convection lines, and you can see them. They kind of look like little worms. And then it turns and it evaporates. So it goes from one stage to another. And when I see those little wiggly worms, I see them as tubes, which are water's way of allowing the evaporation to come out. I realize that there's also differentiation lines with the different heat levels and various things. But water is well aware that it's going from one stage to another, and it's never afraid. People say, oh, does boiling water look structurally bad? Actually, no, it doesn't, surprisingly. Seeing people are surprised. No, we don't forget where it came from. Like, we feel like sometimes we are in a world that is something we don't recognize. The reason we don't recognize it is probably because it's not what home feels like. We already know what home feels like. The fact that we know there is a difference and it doesn't feel right means we already know what home feels like. Because water knows home. It is home. And when I see the water from the mountains coming down, making its way to the sea, water's always going back home. And if hydrogen is the spirit of water, then the sun is there, and everything that evaporates is the creator bringing its children back home.
Incredible. Oh my goodness, I'm almost like speechless. Yeah, just I think of the boiling example and us projecting our own thought like, oh, well, water must be afraid. No, water remembers that this is just a change, just a catalytic, if that's a word, experience going through a change, and it will circle back home. And that has profound implications on the moments of suffering that we experience in life. And it also has profound implications on us thinking about death, given that we are water. We will return home and we will come back and we will continue in this dance of experience that we're having. And
my friend Moses Hackman, he also says that the life cycle of water is the life cycle of the soul. And there's much we don't know. But for the few people, the multiple people that I've interviewed that have had near-death experiences, one of the biggest fears I think a lot of people have is that, is it going to be hard? Am I going to choose the right light? Is it going to be painful? And nearly all of them have said, it was so easy.
Yeah.
Even when one lady said when she transitioned, she was like, oh my God, was that it? That was so easy.
Right.
I think just being in the physical body comes with all of the things that it is to be human. It does come with this thing that we have, which is fear.
Yeah.
But the overriding thing of fear is not, some of the things that people might think it is. I was in the Christchurch earthquakes, both of them.
Wow.
And the second one was really, really bad. And I was really scared because I'd never been in an earthquake before. And the big one, several people were killed. Like, we could see holes through our walls.
Wow.
And anyway, I was outside. The next day we were going to leave, and we had no gas in the car. I don't ever do this anymore, have no gas in the car.
Yeah, you always have gas in the car.
And I was going door to door asking people to give me some, if they had any gas, just so we could leave.
Yeah.
And as I was out there was this child, and I was shaking. I was really frightened. And I'd been in fight or flight for a long time because we'd had thousands and thousands and thousands of aftershocks from the first one. And there was this little girl who was only about 8, and she was standing at the end of her driveway freaking out. And I couldn't see where her parents were, and I just got down on my knees to her and get to her height, and I just said, listen, everything's going to be all right. We're going to find your parents. This is temporary, honestly. And in everything that I did, I absolutely 100% meant it. I felt it. I put her feelings before mine, and I was going to protect her and look after her no matter what. Even though I was scared, I found my strength by giving strength to others. And we know how to do this.
Mm.
We can all do this.
Right.
It only takes, if you look at the percentage of water that's drinkable on the surface of Earth, which is approximately 2%, not talking about the primary water inside the Earth's mantle and all that. I remember somebody telling me this and it really resonated. It only takes that 2% of humanity to shift, to be able to change the whole world. We're just about there, if not there. We can do this.
Amen. Beautifully said. Well, I don't want to keep more of your time. I have so many more questions, but I think it's
Yeah,
best that we stop
I gotta get
here
a
'cause we
flight.
could go for like 4 hours. So I think I would like you to plug your book that you're working on, if you could, real quick, and just share about that as we wrap up.
It's called The Living Language of Water, and it covers all these topics and many, many more topics. There's over 1,500 photo examples. It teaches you how to do it in the back, so you get the method as well. And I even go into homeopathy. I go into frequency, vibration, all of the examples of thought, words, even media and movies, and a huge music section of all different genres of music, because I want the young people to be able to identify with certain genres of music too. And what we found is that water loves to design imagery relative to certain words in music. And it's fascinating when you see like a crocodile appear for Crocodile Rock from Elton John's song, and then you have like a Mongolian throat singer and you see the most incredible kind of emanating geometries, and there's so much there. The water just seems to also have a sense of humor sometimes. So we go through it all, and it has taken me years, and it has been a huge effort. But to have it out to the world is a big deal for me. So hopefully it will be on my website. You'll be able to get it. I'll be letting people know on my social media as well. So anyone will be able to find on my website, which is my name, VedaAustin.com.
We'll throw that in the show notes, so we're good. Yeah, just check the show notes for all that. Well,
great.
Veda, I was sitting here thinking, like, as you were talking, I'm like, this is incredible to have, like, I feel so blessed to have you in my home, and, Amanda yesterday, and all these incredible conversations with people that I love and respect. So, just thank you for being who you are, and thank you for being my friend, and thank you for this experience.
It is such an honor. I love that you said thank you for being my friend, because I met you and I felt like we'd always been friends.
Right.
Always been friends. And that's water, remembering water.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
Are you getting enough magnesium in your diet? If you live in the modern world, it's pretty likely that you aren't. Because our soil, food, and water supply are deficient in magnesium, many of us are as well. Magnesium is one of the most essential electrolytes of the body. It plays a crucial role in cellular hydration, muscle and brain function, the electrical functions of our body, energy production, and sleep. Magnesium Breakthrough from BioOptimizers is the best magnesium supplement on the market. Where most magnesium supplements provide maybe 2 forms of magnesium, Magnesium Breakthrough from BioOptimizers contains 7 different forms of magnesium and is made from all natural ingredients to deliver optimal magnesium levels to the body. And, unlike many synthetic magnesium supplements, Magnesium Breakthrough is free from additives, fillers, and artificial ingredients. It is formulated using ingredients of the highest quality, including cofactors to multiply the delivery of magnesium to every cell in your body and absorb at a very high rate. In our household with 2 young kids running around, for my wife and I, sleep is probably the biggest concern. And we both notice a huge difference in our quality of sleep when we're taking Magnesium Breakthrough regularly. There's a reason that it's BioOptimizer's best-selling product, and that speaks volumes because they have a ton of amazing products in their store. Nurture your mind and body with this all-natural, full-spectrum magnesium supplement. Simply go to biooptimizers.com/Alec and use promo code ALEC10 during checkout to save 10%. And if you subscribe, not only will you get amazing discounts and free gifts, you'll make sure your monthly supply is guaranteed.